What happens when you leave behind everything familiar, your country, your culture, your support system, to pursue a profession where you're not sure you even belong? For many immigrant nurses, the journey to becoming a CRNA can feel isolating and overwhelming. You're not just building an application, you're adapting to a new culture, overcoming self-doubt, and trying to succeed in spaces where you rarely see stories like your own. Julianna Washington knows that feeling personally. Her path from Brazil to CRNA school was anything but linear. It included uncertainty, rejection, and hearing no multiple times before finally gaining acceptance to a CRNA program. But her story is proof that success in nurse anesthesia isn't reserved for applicants with perfect journeys. It's often built through resilience, persistence, and simply refusing to quit. Welcome back to the CRNA Mentor Podcast. I'm joined today by Julianna Washington, a second-year nurse anesthesia resident from North Carolina. She is currently the class president, and she was actually invited as a speaker at the annual North Carolina State Anesthesia Conference. Before stepping into leadership roles in nurse anesthesia, Juliana was an immigrant from Brazil trying to find her place in a new country while pursuing a dream that often felt out of reach. In this episode, we talk about resilience, rejection, identity, and what it takes to keep moving forward after hearing no. Juliana shares her experience overcoming CRNA school rejections, adapting to life in the United States, and ultimately transforming those setbacks into growth, confidence, and leadership within nurse anesthesia. Welcome to the podcast, Juliana.
Thank you for having me. It's really an honor to be here.
We're happy to have you. And I love talking to individuals with different backgrounds and how they've navigated to anesthesia school. And you have a very, very interesting background. And I, this idea that everything has to be linear in anesthesia and applying to school is not the case. And you are a perfect example of that. And, before we talk about CRNA school and where you're at today, I want people to understand the story behind your success. Because, your story, it started long before anesthesia school even entered the picture. So let's kind of dial it back to, growing up in Brazil. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes. And I would say if you had asked me that when I was little, when you ask children, what do you want to be when you grow up? My honest answer would probably have nothing to do with anesthesia. And the reason why that is unfortunately, in Brazil, that career doesn't really exist. It's held at a different level. So I wouldn't even know what a CRNA was.
Hmm.
Um, and I was born and raised in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. I lived it with my mother and my younger brother. My mother and my brother and my dad separated when I was very young. I was probably about 4 years old. And to be completely honest, Tyler, my biggest aspiration growing up, as silly as it may sound, is that I would like to have a phone at the house, and not even a cell phone, just a cord phone,
No.
because we lived in poverty, to be honest with you, and things were hard to the point where we did not have running water at times. I know all about carrying buckets of water, and honestly waiting on rain sometimes to have some water at the home. um, Although, I know that sounds very difficult, it when you live in it, it's your normal, right? You don't have
Mhm.
anything else to compare to. So the idea of living in a community came from a very young age to me. My grandmother is the biggest model that I have in my life. She was the herbal remedy lady. She was the I am going to see Dona Nea, which is her name, and everybody would come and ask her, "Hey, do you have some herbs for my cough and for this pain and for this infection?" Which now I know it was probably not the best thing, but she made do, and just seeing the love that she had for people, just seeing that even when we didn't have a lot, the little that we had was shared. And I am very, very thankful for that experience. Up to this day, having a 10-year-old daughter, I make a point in teaching her how important gratitude is. And I tell her, we don't know what people are going through. So even if we're walking through and someone is taking the trash out, a smile goes a long way.
Mhm.
So I think that is my pride and joy, is to know that my daughter is being raised, being aware that we live in a community and our jobs is to lift each other up.
That's great. I love that. And this is our Mother's Day special episode. So happy Mother's Day,
Oh,
Juliana.
thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, Juliana, when did you come to the United States, and what was that transition like for you?
Um, I was 18 years old. I had just finished high school in Brazil. And although my parents weren't married, my father was very present in my life. And at that time, he moved to the States when I was probably about 4 years old when he left. And because of him, I was able to attend a good school. And once I finished high school, he wanted me to come to learn how to speak English.
Mhm.
So this was 2005, the end of 2005. I was supposed to come here to stay for a couple months and, just learn how to speak English. And that turned out to be a once in a lifetime opportunity. He worked for a company for several years, and his boss said, "Well, if your daughter would like to stay, I would be glad to sponsor her." And we took that opportunity, and with some arrangements, of course. Um, and that turned into a year. And then, unfortunately, my dad had some health problems and had to go back to Brazil. But before I did, I asked him if he would allow me to move out on my own, find a roommate, and I wanted to see if I was able to put myself through school and take care of my bills. And I wanted to do that as a trial while he was still here. And I told him, I said, "Hey, Dad, if I can't do it in that year, I would just go back home and it's fine. But I don't want to give up before trying."
Mhm.
And, I was able to do that. I started in the US, cleaning homes, and babysitting. And I loved working with children. I love to be a babysitter. And that was my blessing too, because as I was learning English, a lot of the children that I used to take care of, they were in second, third grade. So they would come home with spelling lists and words, and we would practice together. So they were teaching me, they were helping
Wow.
me with spelling, pronunciation.
Yeah.
So that was wonderful. However, I think this was around 2008 when the recession happened.
Mhm.
And the first thing that you are going to cut off on expenses is going to be somebody coming to your house, right?
Sure.
So if you have someone cleaning, you can probably do that yourself. So that's when things got exceptionally hard for me, because I didn't have any work. And it was a point where my dad was no longer here. I was by myself. But I think the most difficult moment is when I actually got evicted from my apartment.
Wow.
At first, I had a 2-bedroom apartment, and then I had to cut down and get a 1-bedroom apartment, all the way down to a studio. So that was, I was at the bridge of uh, giving up, really. I was
Sure.
in crossroads. And thankfully, because of the people that were around me and these children that I was helping raise, they opened their homes for me and say, "Hey, you can stay with us until you get up on your feet."
Wow.
So being from a different country, we hear that uh, just these ideas that are not true about how a country is, or how I think we tend to be stereotypical. But I can honestly say that I have experienced nothing but support and acceptance while
That's
I've
great.
been here in the States.
That's great. Wow, those are some major obstacles to overcome here in this journey. And I like I said, I love talking to people who have immigrated to this country because very often the story goes that you've had to overcome so many different obstacles, even learning English. And you're talking about these third graders that are teaching you English. I've had other mentees that they worked at a Dollar General because that was a great opportunity to interact with customers and learn English. And I think there's so many things that people like myself take for granted, who were born and raised, went to born in Pennsylvania, went to school in Pennsylvania. As I said, before we went online, I'm kind of one dimensional, and I feel like this is so eye opening to me to hear these stories. But certainly, a lot of resilience, a lot of grit, that goes into your journey. Just kind of even getting started. Now, tell me a little bit about nursing school. Now, you weren't in nursing school in Brazil. You came here, and when did you go to nursing school?
Um, so I honestly had no idea that nursing is what I would choose.
Mhm,
My first de- my first diploma was in dental assisting.
mhm,
So I was able to meet a nurse that worked in our oral surgery office forever ago. But I just fell in love with everything that she was doing. And a lot of the nursing flourished while I was at the dentist office because, we are taking care of all different ages. And I have always been very empathetic. Um, with knowing when somebody is afraid, learning how to look at those nonverbal signs, and
mhm,
that just came very natural to me. And after i I was probably there for maybe 2 years. My um my boss came to me, and he said, what is your 5-year goal? And I'm 20, so I'm like, 5 year, I'm just trying to make it till next month. um so I was like, I think I really would like to be a nurse. But I think that's the thing when you're an immigrant, Tyler. Your aspirations are, your dreams are not big. You're literally, unfortunately, the concept is just to make it, is just to get by. So for me, I always heard my mother talking about all these dreams that she had, but it was sad to me in a way because, I would think that's never going to happen. My outlook was so negative then, but
yeah,
I can say that now, but at the time it was my reality.
mhm,
And I think the most defining moment in my life, this was before I had, the job at the dentist office after my dad had gone back. I had I picked up a job at a grocery store. Not the regular kind, like the big fancy ones. Um, and I was 20 years old, and it was my first day on the job. And I was taking the trash out, walking around the store, and the look that I would get, it's what really upset me and made me feel really bad. So I took the next logical step that I could. I went and cleaned the bathrooms because nobody's going to see me in there.
um,
But that was, again, that wall. And I'm like, I have to protect myself. So I'm going to go in here and do the best job that I can. And as I was, cleaning the mirrors and looking at me, I had a flashback. And this is a sensitive topic, but I feel like it needs to be discussed. It needs to be talked about. It needs to be talked about, and is the fact that at a very young age, unfortunately, I was molested as a child. And unfortunately, the majority of cases is this happens with people that we know. So 90 to 93% of the cases is someone that the family knows and trusts.
mhm,
And I believe it was from the ages of 7 to 10 years old. And at 10 years old is when I think it finally clicks. and you learn to think, hey, this is not okay, and I'm going to have to speak up for myself. I wish it would have happened sooner, but it didn't. And the hardest thing for me was to learn how to forgive, but most importantly, how to forgive myself, because I've carried that for a long, long time, trying to think back, hey, I should have, I could have, but I was a child. So my job as a woman now is to realize that I was a child. It was not
Yeah.
my fault. It was not fair, but it happens. However, I would not allow someone else to have power over the choices that I make today. So while I was cleaning those mirrors, I just start thinking, my goodness, I've been through so much and I'm still here. And this is really hard. And it to me, it was just embarrassing because deep inside, I knew I could do more. And I'm not saying that, my mom, she had very little education, but she taught me the biggest lesson that I could ever learn. She said, no matter what you choose to do in life, you do it well and you do it proudly. So I take that to my core. It doesn't matter if I'm taking trash. It doesn't matter if you know, we just start clinicals and intubating, but I'm going to do my best and I'm going to do it proudly.
Mhm.
So after that moment, I eventually, couldn't hide for the rest of the shift. So I have to vacuum
Yeah.
the front of the store. So as I was doing that, I had a gentleman, probably in his 40s, very kind. You can tell, we are very good at reading the room and reading people.
Right.
And I could tell that he was just curious. And he said, excuse me, young lady, I'm not asking this. I don't want to offend you in any kind of way. But he said, why is a young lady as pretty as you doing this kind of job? And Tyler, I swear, I wanted to run away and just never
Uh-huh.
come back. But I picked up my little crown. I put it on, my imaginary crown. And I said, sir, I am doing this job today because one day I'm going to look back and I'm going to be thankful for this day because I will be where I want to be. So I'm doing this job now to pay for my school, to pay for my education. And I thank you for asking me that question. And I honestly feel that my religion, my God is everything, and I truly believe in signs. And I think that was God that day telling me, don't give up, and I'm here with you and I'll be with you every step of the way.
Mhm.
So that was the most defining moment in my life. And after that day, I just gave 200% because I knew that, I would look back, and my biggest regret, is that I haven't seen that gentleman again. It was a long, long time ago. So, but I would have loved to see him again and say, thank you for asking me that day, and you gave me the hope that I needed that day.
Wow, Juliana, that your whole story is so powerful, and I appreciate you sharing those sensitive details about your childhood. These things they need to be said, and I appreciate how raw that is because it was a defining moment of your journey, and yeah, that's super powerful. I know, and one of the reasons that we have you on today is, and we'll get to it here shortly, is that you wrote a book, to help others who may have come from a similar background or trying to navigate this process themselves. So if you guys are interested in hearing more about Juliana's story, we'll talk about it a little bit later. But this kind of outline that she offered is also in her book. So thank you for sharing all those details, and just picture you looking in the mirror in that bathroom and kind of having that moment. And wow, thank you for sharing that. At what point, Juliana, did you feel that nursing school, and then when did you start considering anesthesia?
So I always tended to be attracted to things that are hard.
Hmm.
So when I was able to finish my ADN, so I had my ADN first.
Hmm.
I my first shift in ICU, the rotation shift, I looked at all the lines and all the medications, and I said, I will never do this. There is too many chances for things to go wrong, and I'm just not okay with this. And then sure enough, the first job I applied to was in ICU. So during my first shift, I had a preceptor, and beginning of the shift, I went to her and I said, listen, I am very scared of people that are not alive. And I just want to get this out of the way. So if that happens today, I want to be able to help. I want to make sure that I can do it and that I'm comfortable with that situation. And if I can't, I'm not wasting my time, your time. I'll do something else. And she laughed, and respectfully, we were respectfully and unfortunately, death is very common in ICU. So we had that happen. She was there with me the entire way. And, I think as nurses, our feelings and our needs become secondary, and you are able to focus on what that family is going through. You're able to focus on, that patient, that loved one. And at that moment, I was okay. I think I can do this. And then I will say, sadly, during my ADN, I didn't hear a whole lot about CRNAs. The emphasis, the focus was, nurse practitioners. And again, in healthcare, we're so essential. And, but unfortunately, that's something that I was not really exposed to.
Mm-hmm.
However, I did have a military teacher. She has been my mentor as well. And she was calling out people in the room and saying, you're going to go to the ED, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. And she pointed at me and she said, you're going to do 2 years in the ED, you're going to do 2 years in ICU, and then you're going to go into nurse anesthesia. And I'm like, okay, yes, right. Yeah. But it didn't take 4 years. It took a little longer, but here I am. And I made sure, and I told her, I said, I know that at the time I wasn't ready to receive it, but you really planted a seed in me. But even after that, it wasn't until COVID, probably 2020, 2021, that I became more comfortable with tuning with that patient, being very careful with ventilators and RT, and being aware that, if RT made changes, that could affect my patient, that could affect my sedation plan and blood pressure. So I started really enjoying the morning start in like weaning sedation and trying to wean ventilation. And I became really enamored with, how delicate that was, and being very careful, having the concept that yes, you can give medications, but you cannot take them back. So let's do it carefully, let's do it slowly, and we can always give more if we need to.
Yep.
And then when we had to page anesthesia for difficult intubations, I was just like, wow, that is amazing. They just come in, this is the amount of information that they know, and they're getting the job done. And at that time, I had not yet taken my CCRN. So again, I'm trying to do the hard things. And I said, okay, I pushed this off for a couple of years. So I paid for the exam. I gave myself 30 days to study. And I was like, okay, now we're going to take the test. So I became certified. And unfortunately, I do want to say that I prematurely rushed the process. And we'll probably get into the weeds a little bit more. But I think anesthesia came to me slowly at the beginning of COVID, and slowly realizing how delicate and how scared these patients were, knowing that we're going to put a breathing tube in. And as a nurse at that time, having to hold up an iPad to the patient in the room in full PPE, with me and them not knowing if that would be the last time they're talking to their loved ones.
Yeah, COVID was a trying time for everyone, especially all of you who were in the ICU. It was a little bit different in anesthesia, depending on, how big your center was and your involvement in helping out. I want to revisit this idea that your professor is kind of. I had this picture of like Harry Potter, where it's kind of like you're you're going here, you're going there, you're going to anesthesia. Um, was there ever a time? I know you had alluded to this earlier. You know that did CRNA ever feel like unrealistic or unattainable for you?
Yes, but first I do have to make a comment on the Harry Potter pun here. I'm a huge fan, and the 4th book, and this was very sentimental to me because when the 4th book came out, it was in Portuguese, and
Mm.
then I had borrowed that book and read it, and, we can afford buying, books. So my mom bought me the 5th book in Portuguese, and I read that book, and when I was here in the US, the 6th one came out and it was in English. And I'm like, okay, I have to read it. I don't know how to read English that well, but we're gonna try it. So at first, I would write on the margins of the book every word that I did not know, and you can imagine basically the whole thing.
Yeah.
And because I was trying to translate every piece, and then eventually, I literally stopped translating, and I just kept reading the book. And
Wow.
what I came to realize coming to the end of the book is that a word is used in so many different contexts that later on it will explain itself because it's going to show up again.
Hmm.
And I use that as an analogy as to I for the majority of my career I also did travel nursing. And the comparison I make is that yes, I may not have the context of a cardiac nurse or a trauma nurse or a pediatric nurse, but the context, the basic skill is the same. I can assess a patient. I know how to assess a patient. So everything else, it's like a book. You're put in a situation, you have a
Yeah.
different context. Some things are going to come second nature. And as long as you can assess your patient and step back and think about it, um, you're going to be fine.
Hmm. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's great perspective there, and I think that does track all across different specialties, even in anesthesia as well. Juliana, I want to talk a little bit about you mentioned previously applying maybe a little bit too early. You did have a couple unsuccessful attempts at getting into CRNA school. What kind of changed from those unsuccessful attempts to getting accepted to the program that you're in now?
Okay. So yes. So after I passed the CCRN, I'm like, okay, I checked this box. I checked this box. I've been a nurse for 8 years. Which school would not take me? I know what I'm doing. And yes, unfortunately, that not work well for me. I initially applied to 3 schools and I received 3 no's. After the first one, okay. After the second one, okay. After the third one, it was, devastating.
Sure.
And I remember I picked the saddest movie I could on Netflix,
Oh,
and I have my tub of mint chocolate chip ice cream, and I just, had my moment, cried. I'm not smart enough. All these things. I am too dark. I am, so that was the reality, right?
hmm.
Because we have to allow ourselves to be okay being uncomfortable, but I'll tell you, Tyler, again, defining moment. That morning, I stepped back and I wrote down everything that I could, looking outside the box. So I took my feelings out of the situation. And I said, yes, Juliana, you have been a nurse for 8 years, but that also means that you have been out of school for about 10, 12. So if you were sitting at an admissions committee and you have 200 or more applicants, who do you think they're going to pick? And then, I also kind of had to take a deep look into my GPA. And, I had F's in my transcript, Tyler. But here is the thing, not many schools will stop and say, oh, yeah, she got F's throughout the entire semester because she was evicted and had to count coins to put gas in her car. So they don't know
Mm.
that. They don't have time
Right.
for that.
Right.
And, instead of taking that for granted and using that as a justification, I came up with a plan and I said, okay, I'm going to try again. And one of the third things I did was to email all 7 schools in North Carolina and ask for feedback. And I'm not saying this, please don't go emailing all schools in the country and asking for feedback. My rule was to email one time. If I heard back, great. If not, that's okay. And I did have, out of the 7 schools, 3 emailed me back and gave me some tips, and that kind
Yeah.
of aligned with what I had identified already, which was take recent classes, take advanced level classes to show that you can handle the coursework.
Yep.
And that's when I went to the AANA website and started finding out about meetings. And I had
Yep.
no idea about how advocacy and politics is a part of this profession. So I'm going to say it was a hard thing to have 3 no's, but those 3 no's open up so many doors that I wasn't even aware that existed.
Yep.
So I would say I had to stop looking at at the final goal and starting looking at it as a marathon and not a race. So it wasn't just a fix on, a quick fix. It was like, oh, wow, there's way more than what I thought it was.
100%. And I want to key in on something specifically here that you mentioned is that this, this deep reflection on who you are as an applicant, what you've done so far, and how can you pivot and or enhance your application strategically. I talk to so many mentees and every day on my phone calls, I talk to many people that they're kind of checking the boxes and they don't understand
Mm.
why they're not getting interviews, and they don't understand, well, I've done all those things. It's like, yes, you are eligible, but you're not competitive. And how can you become competitive? And just all those things that you outlined, asking for direct feedback. Now, you won't get that from every program, but there are some
Mhm.
that will entertain it, right? Also, this idea of understanding more about this profession, that is huge. Attending the meetings, really dialing into how can you articulate that you understand this profession at a deeper level, and that, in my opinion, is one way to certainly stand out, which is what you're able to accomplish in that conference. And actually, we met at annual congress this past year. Tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about how that networking piece kind of played into where you're at and where you plan to go here with anesthesia.
Yes, and I think it started through one of the Facebook communities. We
Uh-huh.
had a mutual friend at the time, Ike Bartel, and he's
Yeah.
also our RNA. And I think I started taking his suggestions for podcasts. And then later on, he was able to say, "Hey, I have this group, and there is the CRNA Mentor, and he's got lots of tips. The community is growing every day, so I was able to be part of that community. And like, huge shout out to you for having the
Thank you.
time and just allowing people to just come on and ask questions. And you are a great advocate, because I have seen, you're trying to build a platform where people feel safe asking questions.
Yeah.
There's no judgment. And I think you're doing just that. So that's
Thank you.
wonderful.
Thank you.
And then when I met you, I think it was the ANA meeting, annual meeting in Nashville.
Nashville. Yep.
We were able to talk and I got my
Yep.
picture. And again, you're just very passionate about education. And I would say networking is a huge part of it, because I guess there's so many applicants, but not a lot of people are attending these meetings. And the first time I attended a district meeting,
Mhm.
there was not a track for RNs. So when you
Right.
registered, it was either a CRNA or other. So I think we are definitely moving in the right direction, and I'm
Agreed.
so excited. And I do have to mention a couple, honestly, giants that I've met just, by attending these meetings, which first started with my main mentor, Caroline Kilman. She was the one that had a shadowing program in the hospital that I worked.
Uh-huh.
And, after I got my 3 no's, I reached out to her and she lifted me up. She said, A no is it's a not yet is not a definite no.
Yep.
And you're going to keep trying. You're not going to give up. You're kind, you're smart, and I can see a lot in you. And she gifted me a scrub cap, which I had no idea. I couldn't plan on it, but I was wearing that scrub cap just a couple weeks ago when I was able to have my first pediatric nasal intubation. So
Nice.
I took it off that day. I sent her a picture and I said, I did it. And I just want to thank you for, all
That's
these
awesome.
years.
That's awesome.
Um, Next, my mentor, Dr. Ian Hewer, he is a huge part of, getting my passion for politics, and a wonderful role model. The only thing I disagree with him respectfully is his taste in soccer, because I'm from Brazil. We're the best in soccer, and he's from England. But maybe one day I can convince him. Um, but yeah, just having people that you can look up. I also met Dr. Sharon Pierce at the same meeting that we were in, and I had a copy of my book with me, and I wanted to gift it to her, and she said, "I'm not going to take it unless you sign it." So it's just
Oh,
like
that's cool.
meeting these people and knowing that they're real people and they're rooting for you.
Yep.
Um, so if anybody has the chance, please go. It's a huge part of it. And those are the things that will set anyone apart.
Yes, 100%. And I think also what I want to point out is you mentioned many mentors, and you can have more than one. You can have three. You can, the goal here is trying to align where you want to go with people who are already there. And take their piece of advice along the way. And sometimes you'll get conflicting things. Sometimes it's the soccer team, which I'm a big soccer guy. I would agree with you. Brazil is the best. But take those pieces as you go, and kind of cross-reference them. You might be hearing conflicting things, and it's not necessarily wrong. Many mentors are just operating from their perspective. But if they are at a point, you mentioned one of your mentors is very involved in the politics. Obviously their input into that political side of things probably put more emphasis in. So I think that's great. And I think one person too we also want to shout out, which we were talking before we went on air, is Jeff Moulter.
Oh,
Can you just
yes.
share your experience with that? Because this is awesome. I love Jeff is just a great human being.
Yes, it was the hugest shock for me. Again, like as we were chatting, I am not a huge social media person. I'm okay talking to people, but I'm very shy on camera.
Sure.
Like honestly. And I started a TikTok just because of my whiteboards that I created. And then I started getting some reviews for my book. I really wanted people to see that as well. And somehow got I sent a message to Dr. To the president, Jeff, and he actually wrote me back, and I was just saying, I was congratulating him because I saw a picture and I said, "Oh, wow, I was there when you traded the pin and that was amazing. So congratulations." He said that he would love to, chat with me in person. So we exchanged phone numbers, and I was really not expecting the president of the AANA to call my number. And I was definitely not ready for that. So when I answered the phone and he said his name, it took me, a good couple seconds to realize that it was him calling me. And, especially for me, like everything that we talked about, how huge that is just to have someone in that position to take a couple minutes to listen to your story and talk
Right.
to you.
Right.
And that's what I want people to know is when you're stepping into this career, there's so many opportunities and so many great things that we can do, but you have to put yourself in uncomfortable situations.
Hmm.
Because this first meeting I attended, I knew no one.
Right.
So it was very uncomfortable, but I had to be brave and go up to someone and shake their hands and smile and say, "Hey, I'm trying to get into school." But
Mhm.
absolutely, networking is a must.
Yep, yep, definitely. And through your networking, you're already getting recognized as, somebody that's contributing to this, the mentorship to, helping making this profession better. And one of those things, and one of things I talked about earlier that you did is create this book and this planner. Can we talk about that a little bit from, your experience?
Yeah, so I love that you said book planner because honestly that's what it is. And the planner part of it is that what I noticed, Tyler, is that when I had to go and, look at why this didn't happen, there was a lot of information. There's a lot of information out there, but I felt like I had to go in to different places to get it. And I really thought back when I was, even when I was in high school and when I was in ADN school, I said, how cool would it be to have all that with me so I can write it down, so I can make that into a smaller version of a big plan. You have
Mm,
to have a destination, you have to have an end goal, but what we forget about is the in between. How are we going to make that happen? What is the timeline? What are the steps? Going back
mhm,
to nursing school care plans, make it into attainable and measurable outcomes, right? So that's what I try to do with the book. I and again, it just kind of fell into my lap, but this came about a friend asking for help from me going to the first 3 rejections to the following year, out of 3 applications getting 2 interviews. And she said, like, what did you do? And as we're having lunch, I'm talking, and I'm sure you can tell I talk a lot. um, she was trying to write everything down, and I
uh-huh.
told her, I said, hey, just give me 2 weeks. I will put up a Word document for you. And you just turn into a checklist. So as I started writing, it really made me think about my why. And my why is that as a child, I was not able to protect myself at the scariest moment of my life. And how amazing and great it is that, 30 something years later, that is my purpose in my career, that I get to take care of someone facing the scariest moments of their life, going through surgery, not knowing if they're going to wake up. And I'm responsible to keeping those people safe. So
Yep.
it's honestly just a full circle. And I could not be more grateful and thankful. And that's what I wanted to help people look at and really think about their whys, because your grit is going to fall back into your why. When things get hard, and when you don't get the A's in the test, is your grit that's going to keep you going. So we
Yep.
have to have that. So your why can't be into how much money will I earn? How fast can I get into school? it You have to think a little deeper than that. And I use my example just as a way to help others do that,
Mhm.
and make it attainable to where, I am an older student. I'm 38 years old. I'll be 39 next month. I have a child. I have a husband. We literally had to uproot our home and move to a different state to make this happen. So you cannot have ifs. You have to make that happen if that's what you want. So
Yep.
your why has to be strong enough so that you can fall back on it when things get hard, because things will get hard.
Yep.
But it's up to you.
I agree with you 100%. And I really focus on the why as well. I think that I think it will evolve over time. It's not something that's static, but it will carry you through those hard times, certainly. Now, one of the things in your book, Juliana, is you talk about this pizza pie model. Where did that come from? And tell us a little bit about that.
One, my husband loves pizza. Two, I'm a very visual person, and I was trying to think, and I really was trying to look at, like we were saying, talking about the race and the marathon. I said, the application is just a big thing. I can't do all of this at one time, just as
Yeah.
you cannot eat a whole pizza at one time. So I'm going to break this into separate topics that I can dig into it. And the
Mhm.
coolest thing is that nurses always get pizza parties as well. So I thought, okay, I am a nurse. I am like the dough of the pizza. I have knowledge. I already have knowledge, right? Which is what you put on top of your pizza.
Mhm.
So all that the application is I'm layering on top of the knowledge that I already have. And I just need to package it, make it prettier, and then I can turn it in. So
Mhm.
I'm not going to give all the topics, but just as an example, some of the slices of the pizza that are going to complete your application will
Right.
be your financials, will be your volunteering, will be your awareness of politics, will be your grades, will be your testing. But again, you can't meet all of those goals at one sitting. You're going to have to
Right.
be able to plan ahead, think about your time. Um, and then, only then, once that's completed and you have addressed every topic, then you should be ready to apply.
Great. Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I love that idea of all these different pieces to the pie because it is that. You can't you have to focus on each individual piece, but they all kind of go together. Let's fast forward a bit here. Uh, let's talk about anesthesia school now. What has been the hardest adjustment for you in regards to CRNA school?
To me, is to understand that in comparison is a thief of joy. And
Mm,
I say that because when you're applying, you're competing. You're competing with a bunch of people. So I
mm,
also had to step back and stop doing that and knowing that, yes, there is many more people that are fighting with you, but only you have this story. Only you have these qualities. And this is where being in a program, being open and having support is so essential, because when I get to these places and just these, having to master these difficult concepts, you honestly, it's imposter syndrome is real, and you
yeah.
second guess yourself. And to me is to be able to trust, my professors and my director. And it's very important that they've told me, they said, you have earned where you are right now.
Yeah.
We did not pick you for a mistake. We know what we're doing. We believe in you. So you have to believe in yourself. We can't do that for you. You have to believe in yourself. And again, having your classmates, like, be vulnerable. Come to your classmate and say, hey, I'm not understanding this. I'm not mastering this. And again, take your feelings aside, asking for help when you need help. Um, and trying to find balance. And the biggest thing for me as a mother, I've had to tell my daughter, no, I can't take you to the park right now.
Mm.
I have these tests, but at the same time, I have to make certain sacrifices. And not that long ago, I had to study at a trampoline park with my ear pods, and I'm doing flashcards, and she's having the time of her life. So it's like a give and take. You have to be
Mhm.
okay, and you have, especially with children, you have to turn back to them and helping them see the big picture. Like, yes, it's hard. We are right here together. We're doing this together. I'm doing this for us. And I think the biggest thing, we may have some guilt and say, my children are growing up. I don't want to miss it. I don't want to do that. But I try to ask them, several people that I talked to, and I said, what would you tell your child if they had a kid and they had this huge opportunity? Would you let them be a reason to why you would not do that? Or would you have them be the reason why you do that?
Mhm.
So a lot of it, it's already there. We just have to frame it a little bit differently.
Yeah, that's great. Juliana, at what point, as an immigrant, as somebody who's competing to get into CRNA school, at what point do you feel like you finally belong here? Are you there now?
That's a hard question. Um, I think for me was starting clinicals
Mm,
and being the one talking to the patients, being the one pushing that bed back and talking and just like getting them to trust me. in just such amount of time that you have once you meet them.
Yeah.
And then having, I think it's just knowing that you're it, and knowing that yes, this situation is new, but I have been a nurse before. I have been a nurse. I've been there. Like, this is, again, we're just layering things on top of what we already know. And to me, like, again, mentorship, like having these people now come back and ask me, hey, would you like to talk to these people? Would you like to do this? Like, talking to Jeff, talking to you. um I didn't plan on any of this. My goal when I wrote my book and when I got into school was, I want to help 5 people get into CRNA school. And I have been able to do 3 people so far. And I'm like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
I think it's life is about what you leave behind, what you give is not about what you have.
100%. And part of my personal goal with CRNA Mentor is identifying individuals like yourself, who are going to make an
Mhm.
impact, who have, went through this journey and have some value to bring and want to share it. So that's excellent. I want to talk a little bit about Juliana. You're currently the class president of your cohort. How did you step into that leadership role?
Um, I've always been a starter. Um, I always have been attracted to, like, let's change things, let's make things better. So
Hmm.
I think it was very natural, and thankfully I had the opportunity to be the class president in my nursing school for my 2-year degree. So it was very helpful to have that experience, and I'm just thankful for my classmates trusting me with this, because it's a lot of stress on top of what we already have. But it has been such a gift, and I want to be part of the change. I have huge shoes to fill. So I think that uh, I just want to show people that yes, bad things can happen in your life, but what you do after that is what defines you as a person.
Yeah. No, I love that. Uh, Juliana, you were invited recently to speak at the annual North Carolina State Conference. What does that moment mean to you, being asked to kind of come on stage there?
Um, Unreal, honestly, because like I said, not that long ago, I was there. First time, no other nurses there. It's still unreal. I am so beyond grateful that I have something to contribute. And that only it I honestly don't feel like I'm worthy. It's just there is so many wonderful people in this field. But I'm just so excited that, I just want to reach people and inspire them, and walk along with them, because we need people that will help us see the good that we have inside of us.
Yeah.
And again, if it wasn't for mentorship and networking, this wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. No, 100%. I often, I feel that when you get offered or this invitation to speak, it's very validating, right? It's like you're doing something right. Somebody else is noticing you. You get a call from Jeff Malter. It's like, wow, this is I'm connecting with people who are in such a spotlight or on stage, and when they reach back and pull you up, it's like, why me?
Yeah.
And I think part of even like what I've done with CRNA Mentor, it's kind of about like faking it till you make it. Like
Yeah.
there will be moments in this journey where it's like I don't feel like I should be here. For me in particular, like I kind of pitched this idea of this RN meet and greet at mid-year assembly in Washington, D.C. Now, this a couple weeks ago was my second time doing that. The first time that I did it, it was the first time that I was attending mid-year assembly, and I was trying to tell everybody about what mid-year assembly is all about. And I'm like, wow, this is. I remember calling my brother, and I'm like, Wes, I said, I feel like I'm really faking it now. He's a professor down at Auburn, and he's like, Ty, he's like, I've been faking it for a long time. He said, I still don't know if I'm doing it right, but that's what this is all about, just kind of putting yourself out there. it's also about, putting out good in the world. And I think if you put good out in the world, it will come back to you. And we just got back from Disney a couple of days ago, and there's like 4 different occasions where like random strangers would come up and like give me something. I don't know why me. And my kids are like, why do people keep giving you stuff? I'm like, I think it's because of CRNA Mentor. I said, you put good out in the world, good comes back to you. And they're like, I don't know, Dad. I don't know. But
Yeah.
it's one of those things that I truly believe, if you're out here to make this profession better, if you're out here to help others, these opportunities will open up for you. And Juliana, I think, your story is so powerful, because I think many aspiring CRNAs are quietly kind of feeling like they don't really fit the mold, right? Maybe it's they've had rejections in the past. Maybe it's because they come from like a different background. Maybe it's language barriers. But you have really kind of shown us that you can break down a lot of these barriers. And what do you think, Juliana, is representation means for immigrants or for really non-traditional students in anesthesia?
It's 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 extremely important. And like I said, when I went to the first meeting, to be honest, Tyler, there were not a lot of people that looked like me. And you think the majority, I guess the majority of the people going into school are of a younger age. They don't have families, or children. So you have to understand, again, stop comparing yourself to other people, and nobody's going to do this for you. I want my main goal, years down the road when I have enough experience, it's to go into high schools, or maybe even at younger ages, for like career day, and talk about anesthesia. And Dr. Elena Gold too, huge trailblazer for
Yeah.
diversity in nurse anesthesia. And like, if I attended one of the virtual meetings, I wasn't able to go in person, but it's just, be surrounded by like-minded people. It doesn't matter what you look like, but be surrounded by people that share the same goals as you, and do it proudly. And again, like, can you imagine if every immigrant or every non-traditional student, just like me, say, okay, I'm going to help 5 people
Yeah.
to do this, and it's going to be a chain event. And I completely agree with you. The good that we put in this world will come back to you 1,000-fold.
Juliana, this is a tough question here, but what does success actually look like now for you compared to when you first started?
Oh, I have a quote in my journal. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. And I think it's Winston Churchill. And I don't look at success as a linear path.
Yep.
I look at it as a circle. And I say that because it will change. Where you are in life, it will change your goals. And like, my first big idea of success was to be able to have a car, because, no one in my family had a car growing up. But then when I got that car, I really thought that's not it. That's just a goal, and I met. So I think success for me is to able to put one foot in front of the other in the morning when things get hard. It's to keep going, and is to keep doing that and helping others do that. So I look at it as not being a final destination. It's the willingness, the grit, and the ability to continue to do that when things are hard.
Yeah, that's perfect. As we wrap this up, Juliana, if someone's listening right now and they feel overwhelmed, they feel discouraged, or are really convinced that they're too far behind to even become a CRNA, what would you tell them?
I've had that question before, and I answered it with this question: how bad do you want this?
Yep.
So if you can, and again, your why is the basis for everything. So if you go into an interview and they're asking you, would you be willing to do X, Y, and Z? If you're the person that says, well, I have my new baby at home right now, so I really can't move. there's going to be another person that's going to say, I will do absolutely what's necessary to make this dream come true for me.
Yeah.
So if, again, how bad do you want it? It's not going to be easy. I hope that it is easy and, you know, everybody gets in on their first attempt, but the statistics are not that favorable. So it's going to get harder. So don't give up and be able to adapt and try to find things to improve along the journey. And Tyler, I'll be honest, if it wasn't, you know, the second time around that I applied, I already had a plan C, D, and E, because I'm the kind of person. I have to have a backup for the backup and the backup. But I knew that, you know, this would happen. I didn't know when, and I'm so grateful and thankful that it was sooner rather than later. But it was just something that I would not have given up on.
And that's very important to point out, because I talk to so many mentees, and it's you know, focused on this idea of, this is going to be the time I'm going to get in. This is the next time. Like, you have to change your mindset. You have to really think about this as, I'm just going to keep improving myself as an applicant until I get in, because I'm going to get in because I have, you know, all the qualities that you've already mentioned, this resilience, this grit, this, you know, I'm not going to take no for an answer. Right. And that has really been how you've defined your journey. I absolutely love that. Juliana, we've talked about, and for all of our listeners, you know, Juliana had mentioned some sensitive topics in regards to her upbringing in terms of as a childhood. And Juliana, can you share us just a little bit information and maybe some resources for these folks?
Yes, absolutely. Just, you know, for some statistics, unfortunately, in the US itself, there is over 63,000 children a year that are victims of child abuse. And I want to share this resource. It's an amazing website, by the way, and it's RAINN, RAINN.org/hotline. For resources and just awareness, tips, certifications that you can be able to be a resource. And again, I hope you never need it, but again, awareness is key. And they have, if you need help, if you're someone that, again, like me, unfortunately has been through this, you can text HOPE, HOPE, to 64673. And you can also call 800-656-HOPE, which is 4673. And someone will be able to talk with you and help you with resources as needed. And again, Tyler, it's unfortunate that this happened, but this is the reality. But I want to be here to tell you that I feel you, and I'm so sorry that has happened to you. But that does not define you, and neither defines your future. And again, just Tyler, thank you so much for being able to talk about this.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you sharing that resource. It's, you know, it's one thing to you know, come and bring this to the attention, even as sharing that vulnerable part of your journey, but to help others, I think that's an important part here as well. Well, thank you very much, Juliana. I think one of our biggest takeaways from this episode is that success in nurse anesthesia doesn't require a perfect or even a linear journey. Juliana's story is a reminder that rejection does not define the future of who you are as an applicant. And adversity can actually become a source of your strength in this entire journey. And it really, it's individuals like yourself who are the ones that have worked the hardest to get here. And those are the people that are going to make the biggest impact in this profession. Whether you're an immigrant, a non-traditional applicant, or someone that's just simply questioning, do you belong in this profession? I'm here to tell you that you do. And I hope this conversation helped you realize that there's not one single mold for becoming a CRNA. Juliana, I want to thank you for sharing your story and your perspective today. And as always, if you found value in this episode, I encourage you to share it with someone who might need encouragement in their journey. Thank you for listening to the CRNA Mentor Podcast. And thank you, Juliana, for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Tyler.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.